Welcome to another episode of CKE. We're on number 11. As you can see, we're finally in person. I'm Gage, the glue man, Hamby. We got Zach, the handyman, Gleason. And yeah, we're feeling nice on a Friday, right before the fights. We got everything going. We got your picks, your locks for the week, where you can make money, where you're going to lose money. Let's get into where we went in last week, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about from last week. I think we hit on a lot of good points last week, individually. I think we talked about a lot of good individual points as it relates to fighters, but I think it's always nice to start off where we went wrong and end on a high note. And we definitely went wrong in the main event last week. Korean Zombie looked good, man. What do you think about that?
Every fight except one. So I'm coming back strong this week. Count my picks. I'm not failing 2 weeks in a row, and that was my first week that I failed. Now furthering on your point of the Zombie, man, he took control. He really just controlled the fight, took it his way, made the fight in his kind of wheelhouse per se, and he took it to the ground, dominated on the ground. Ige didn't have anything. Any kind of counter for that. Looked like he couldn't stop takedowns and he couldn't get the Zombie off him. He did look good in the stand-up, and the Zombie also looked good in the stand-up. But I thought Ige was definitely controlling the stand-up game more than anything. And that's why the Zombie took him down and kind of controlled the ground from the fight, or controlled the fight from the ground.
Yeah, no, I absolutely saw the same thing. And like I've talked about more than once on this show, I think the best way to set up wrestling offense is to have your opponent respect your striking. And I think Korean Zombie came out in the first and second round and kept the fight on the feet. He made Ige respect his striking, and then the later we saw that fight go on, we saw Zombie take it to the ground and just completely dominate on the ground. Ige had no chance of getting up a lot of the times, and it was, not completely total domination, because Ige did have a few good moments where he didn't look absolutely horrible, but part of the thing with the wrestling is that when you face a guy like Zombie, we talked about it. Ige would have had success from the top, and we figured Ige would have more success on the feet, but everybody knew once Zombie could get that fight to the ground, he had the advantage in grappling, he had the advantage in jiu-jitsu. So, I'm not surprised by any means. I am surprised at how the line shifted and how big of a favorite Ige was by fight night, but I think this doesn't really eliminate Ige as a title contender. I think he's still young and still has a lot of opportunity in front of him. And, I think this puts Zombie in a really weird spot, because who's he going to fight next?
Like we talked about before, there's levels, and obviously the Zombie is on the same level as Ortega, who dismantled him earlier last year, and Max Holloway, and obviously the champion Alexander Volkanovski. It'll be interesting to see where they place the Zombie next, and what fight he gets. Maybe Yair Rodriguez, maybe Max Holloway. Who knows?
Well, I thought that was interesting, because Zombie came out and he had actually been practicing his English. He actually came out and spoke in English a little bit and talked and said he wanted to fight Max Holloway, because he says Max has good hands, but he doesn't have any punching power, and I have punching power. Yeah, that was a really good face to make, because I thought the same thing. But, realistically, you can't shame a guy. You can't put a guy down for trying to better his position in the division. If Zombie could get a fight with Max, that would be huge for his career. And if he could beat Max, who's to say he's not the next title contender after Ortega? But there's a couple of things that I just thought were wrong with that. Because Yair and Max were signed for July 17th, and Max pulled out with an injury. So how are you going to call out a guy that's hurt? How are you going to call for a guy who was supposed to fight and is not fighting because of an injury and say, I want that fight? It sounds like they're going to reschedule it, because Yair was offered Giga Chikadze to keep the July 17th main event slot. And like we saw last night, Islam Makhachev got moved up to that main event. And it looks like they're going to schedule Yair versus Max again for that #1 contendership. But You know, I appreciate the Zombie for what he was trying to do for himself in his own career, but it's really hard to call for a fight that you're not going to get because, I mean, in what world does he actually get that fight? In the post-recovery max, where you see, let's save this fight for October and Zombie has to go on ice? I'd rather see him fight again before October.
Let's talk about other fights on previous. I just drop the ball on. How about our boy? Want to be Charles O'Malley?
Cheeto Vera, man.
Cheeto Vera.
Marlon Cheeto.
Cheeto Vera. I'm sorry, Cheeto. But him, he came out versus Davey Grant, looked phenomenal. Definitely, I mean, even though went to a decision, third round decision, came out, looked phenomenal. Showed his immense power and just the power difference. Shored up some things on the defensive side that we saw him being taken advantage of before, i.e. Jose Aldo, when he licked him up to the body.
Yeah.
And Davey Grant fight one. And I thought Davey Grant was going to hit the body. He did, but he didn't do enough damage, didn't get enough strikes there to make an impact on the fight. What are your thoughts on that?
No, yeah, Davey Grant definitely opened up really well. He definitely started that fight about as good as you could have against the guys like Cheeto Vera, who we're talking about as sort of a veteran to the game at this point. We're talking about a guy who got into the UFC at like 23 years old. He's only 28 right now. He's got 5 years of UFC experience under his belt. So Cheeto Vera is pretty serious, but like I said, Davey Grant started off well. He came in the first round and tried to match the pressure that Cheeto Vera was putting on him. They were going to meet in the middle and throw hands. That was pretty evident. And then, you know, just as the fight went on, Davey definitely took some pretty big shots, some damage. He was cut open real bad. So I think it's fair to say that we know why, but he got a little bit more defensive, and that's when Cheeto really turned it on, especially with the short elbows in the middle of the octagon. That was absolutely clutch, and that's not something we see a lot of guys do, so that's something that's pretty unique to Cheeto Vera. I'm with you. It went to a decision. I thought he was going to finish. I thought it was going to get stopped, especially in that third round. But, I mean, all in all, really good fight.
All around, I think he did a phenomenal job using elbows and damaging his opponent in this fight. And you know, we have to look at Cheeto Vera as a upcoming contender. Not to say that he hasn't been one, but we need to get another name. You know, maybe Sean O'Malley 2.
Sean O'Malley 2 was a huge fight.
Absolutely. I mean, that might even be a fight night main event in my opinion. But get him against Sean O'Malley 2. Maybe somebody that's not named Jose Aldo.
Rob Bond.
Rob Bond. Yeah.
So there's levels. I'm just throwing out a name, but
he needs a top 10 guys. What I think we're trying to say here. He's definitely good enough. I think throwing him in against his first big name with Jose Aldo is just a little bit too much. I mean, guy with that experience, arguably one of the greatest, you know, featherweight / bantamweights of all time. Great fighter, but we want to see him in there against a top 10 guy next time.
Big guys left, even though Gates couldn't remember his name, but we'd like to see him fight again soon because, you know, guy's good. Not much else we can say about that. I mean, the only other fight I really wanted to mention from last week was Matt Brown, too, because that was interesting.
Absolutely. However, Diego was controlling the fight up until the point he got knocked out. He was utilizing those spectacular low leg kicks, really diminishing Matt Brown's ability to move at a good pace. I just feel like, you know, he threw one too many leg kicks, and at the end of the day, Matt Brown capitalized on one leg kick, came in with 1-2 down the pipe, and stopped the fight. It's unfortunate to see for Diego Lima, but he didn't really do enough with his hands to even warrant any kind of, counter defense on Matt Brown's part. So what do you think about that, like, and the leg kicks, and how Matt Brown kind of attacked all of those?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said he threw it. Not because there's a limit on how many leg kicks you could throw, but the way that Diego Lima was moving and the way he was using them to start his offensive attacks, it was just one too many in the sense that Matt Brown's a veteran. Matt Brown has been doing this for a long time. Obviously, we saw he's still got a little bit of gas left in the tank, but, he figured out the timing. He timed Lima up just about as perfect as you could do it. And as soon as he went for that leg kick with the hands kind of down, done. So, I don't know. Maybe you call me a bitter better. I don't know. But I'm never picking the Limas again. I don't like them. I think they're pussy. I don't want to fight them by any means, but in terms of as it compares to other professional fighters, I think they're kind of pussy.
I honestly do think, I don't know about you, but they have subpar hands. They
Agreed.
And they don't have excellent wrestling. I mean, obviously they have backgrounds, but they're not getting anybody to the mat. And their hands aren't good enough. They really capitalize off jiu-jitsu on the ground when they're already in control, and their leg kicks, which takes it really out of their opponent's legs, which is a good strategy, but people are starting to figure it out. Well, I mean, we're the calf kick experience. We're down for calf kicks. But these guys that just kind of, everybody knows that they're going to attack their legs, and if you can catch them, it's game over. These guys are pretty much one-dimensional, quote unquote, but they got few other skills than calf kicks at this point.
We haven't decided enough already. You could between the two of us, two ways to check a calf kick. Either have to turn your foot completely outside and catch it on your shin, or throw a bomb right down the middle, which Poirier versus McGregor 3 looking at next week, I wouldn't be surprised if that was more Connor's plan going in to not check Dustin's leg kicks, but to counter off of them and create a big opportunity for himself. But we have a dead week next week, no card, where we'll be looking ahead to that. We'll have a podcast that week, so that's enough Conor McGregor talk for right now. But I think this is a perfect segue. Lead us into our main card, Dave. UFC Vegas 30. Ciryl Gane versus Alexander Volkov.
This week, like I said last week, we had 3 knockouts. Obviously exciting card when packed fights and knockouts. And I stand by this. Watch these cards when you don't even know the names. That's what's more exciting. You don't have any skin in the game per se. You don't have any favorites. You don't know these guys per se. Obviously, we're gonna guide you through that, but it's a lot more fun just seeing people go to town on each other and just use martial arts in a certain way for our entertainment. So I think this card will definitely produce some really good fights, even though they might not be household names. So leading off this card, we have Renato Moicano versus Herbert. Herbert's coming in at 10-2 at the age of 33, 6'1", 150. He's fought 155 throughout his career. That's lightweight, same division as Conor McGregor. He's coming off a loss against Francisco Trinaldo. At that point, he only had 1 loss. Obviously, this last fight was his only loss, and that was his UFC debut. However, I take this with a grain of salt because Trinaldo came in at 165 pounds over the limit, and he got TKO'd in the 3rd round. Herbert did. I think the weight was a deciding factor in this fight. However, I feel like this is going to be a stand-up war. Although Moicano is Moicano's last name? Okay, this guy has several different names.
I'm calling him Moicano.
We're just going to call him Moicano at this point.
Yep.
IBFF champion twice, if I'm not mistaken. But his MMA record is 14-4. He's coming at 5'11", so he's 2-inch height difference. Also, he's moving up to 155 from 145 from featherweight to lightweight. He's coming off a loss at lightweight, which was his debut at lightweight in the UFC. He's a UFC veteran, and he was a big 145er and had a dominant stretch there against 145ers until he faced the top of the top at 145. The Korean Zombie, who we just spoke about, Brian Low-T City Ortega, who is fighting for the championship in a few months, has wins over Cub Swanson, very solid. Also over Calvin Kattar, very solid. And then another loss against Jose Aldo. So I just feel like this is going to be a stand-up battle. I think that Jay Herbert is going to be too big, and he's not going to be able to get him on the ground necessarily. So I think it's going to be a stand-up war. I think the stand-up kind of benefits Jay Herbert because of his power. His power at 155 is not outstanding, but I just, as you've seen the last fight from Moicano, 155 power is definitely a big thing and plays a factor into the move from 145 to 155. I don't think he's going to be able to handle that. So I'm picking Jay Herbert.
No, absolutely. So we actually prepped for a show, friends, and we actually did it together. So I'm going to steal one of Gage's points. But I think one of the big things that we talked about kind of last night as it relates to 145 versus 155 is when you saw Max Holloway move up and fight Dustin Poirier for that interim belt at 155. Good fight, don't get me wrong. Both of them have very high-level boxing, but I think it was just clear that we've seen Max sleep dudes at 145. We've seen him hit dudes really hard because he's a big, tall, lanky, strong 145. But like you said, as you move up in weight class, you could just see Dustin was hitting so much harder in that fight. And Dustin was used to getting hit so much harder in that fight. So I think the adjustment and the experience level of moving, this is Renato Moicano's second fight at 155. But regardless, a lot of his career, we see him using his size advantage at 145 to get wins. Like, for me, Cub Swanson has always been a very small 145er and could have fought at bantamweight. You know,
135.
Yeah, 135. Calvin Kattar is not the biggest 145er himself. So I think size and reach and strength have always been something that Renato Moicano has been able to use to his advantage that are not going to be in his favor in this fight against Jai Herbert. That's the Louisiana roots. Shout out to T-Bob Hebert, LSU Tigers offensive lineman, one of my favorite football players ever. But back to the point, Jai Herbert fights out of England. He trains with Leon Edwards. So I think he's kind of got that instilled in him, that ability to just, this is going to sound like an insult to Leon, and it kind of is, but he has that ability to do just enough to win rounds. If you hit him, he's going to hit you twice and maybe do it a little bit harder. Just enough to win rounds. So I'm not sure if I see a knockout here, despite the fact that both of these guys are relatively chinny and we have seen them get knocked out before. You know, Trinaldo hit Jai Herbert pretty hard. And then, who was it? Rafael Fiziev knocked the mess out of Renato Moicano in his 155 debut. So, you know, for me, I agree. I think it's going to be a stand-up fight. I don't think we see either of them using wrestling or taking this to the ground, despite Moicano's jiu-jitsu experience. But I think Jai Herbert is going to move too much. We've seen his style involve circling, leg kicks, jab in, jab out, don't rob the store and wait for the cops to come. So I think I have Jai Herbert by decision here, but you know, the method isn't as important as getting the fight right. So I think we're both locked in right now at taking Jai Herbert. Let's talk about the odds, actually, because I have a reputation for only picking favorites. And Jai Herbert is actually a pretty sizable underdog here. You see Jai coming in, opening at plus 200, and Renato Moicano coming in at minus 225. So, we're talking about the day before the fight. and the lines are still pretty sizably split. So maybe somebody knows something we don't, but that's super unlikely.
From my perspective, really good odds for a guy that doesn't have a sizable. I just don't think that he's that much worse than Moicano from a bet or odds maker's perspective. Like, I can see that either of them win. In my opinion, this is a pick 'em, but plus 200 for a pick 'em. I mean, you can't bet on Moicano on minus 225. That's too high. I think plus 200 is great value for Jay Herbert. I mean, throw a little bit of money his way, and I honestly think that he could pull out a decision win. I don't think he's going to get knocked out. I think it's more likely that Moicano gets knocked out, in my opinion.
No, yeah, and the odds makers kind of see this the same way that I mentioned earlier, that both of these guys are very chinny. And we're talking about a game of millimeters. One guy gets clipped, gets hurt, and the fight goes a completely different way. But like we said, Jai Herbert at plus 200 has a lot of value to it from a bettor's perspective. And then kind of looking at the props, over 1.5 rounds is minus 150, which is fine odds. But looking really towards value for me, I see the over 2.5 bet at plus 130 positive money. I think that's solid. And if you're really confident, which I'm not willing to say big balls in Cowtown yet, but if the fight were to go to decision at plus 163 odds, those are both pretty hold some value in my head at least. So,
I mean, I think out of all fights, I don't know who's the one. I think you take the underdog. I think there's a sizable chance that you can take it home without betting that much money and making about double your money that you put in. Next, our next fight, the Dirty Bird, Tim Means. He is a UFC veteran. This guy has been around for a long time. This is his 24th fight in the UFC. So he has a wealth of experience. He's coming off a win against Laureano Staropoli. That was his second fight. Hopped into this win streak, or his first fight in this win streak. And then coming off most recently, it went off Mike Platinum Perry. Everybody knows him, fan favorite. We love him here. Not a real smart dude, but loves to brawl, and that's why we love him. But he went toe to toe with him, man. He stuck in there, used a good jab, and won the fight. And he stood in the phone booth and took Mike Perry's best shot. So he's a very tough and durable guy. Wins via his jab, almost kind of Kamaru Usman-esque, not necessarily as much pop as Usman for a welterweight. This fight is in the welterweight, actually. We forgot to say that.
Yeah, 170.
Yes. Back up to his height. Yeah, he's coming in at 6'2", 170. Pretty good size for a welterweight. His opponent is Nicolas Locomotivo Dalby, coming in at 5'11". So there's a 2-inch height difference there. Obviously, coming at 170, barring any kind of weigh-in day mishaps, which I don't think is going to happen on either side. But he's coming in at 19-3, coming off a win versus Daniel Rodriguez, which is kind of controversial. He may or may not have actually won the fight. It was very close, though. He comes out in a karate stance, very wide. Think of like Wonderboy Thompson at welterweight, similar kind of style. Not necessarily as good with his hands as Wonderboy and switching up stances, although he can. I think Dalby's best chance is to damage his body, maybe get a head kick, TKO, but his kicks are way more solid than his hands in this situation. However, I'm going to take Tim Means here. I just think his piston of a left hand for a jab is just going to do significantly amount more damage, especially when Dalby tries to dart in and tries to get a shot on him. I think that the timing and the experience for the Dirty Bird is going to get it done.
No, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. You said this is Tim Means' 24th fight in the UFC. This guy's been doing this for a long time. And Matt Brown paid dividends to me last week, so I'm with you on Tim Means. But a big thing for
You
me,
check your board, man. I don't think guys that are old.
it's not even about old so much as when I look at the comparison, Tim Means has 24 fights in the UFC and he's 37. Nicolas Dalby only has a couple of fights in the UFC. Look,
Also, second in the UFC. He won a belt in Cage Warriors, where Conor McGregor started his career off with one of the stops in his career.
oh yeah, Dalby's only a year younger. Tim Means has a lot more experience in the UFC cage for only being, 365 days max older than Dalby. Will be coming into this fight. And like you said, the karate stance from Dalby it creates awkward striking with the hands. The kicks look very clean, I'll give you that. And we've seen this guy shoot for takedowns. We've seen this guy take guys down. But I think like you really did kind of hit it. Tim Means' boxing is going to look good. Nicolas Dalby is not going to be able to stop the piston of a jab. And I think, barring a crazy ass head kick KO, like you mentioned, I think we're just going to see Tim Means grind on this guy. And kind of the way I see it playing out is maybe Dalby wins the first, Tim Means wins the second. They come into the third round, and Tim Means starts winning the third round. Dalby gets desperate, shoots for a takedown or something. I just see Tim Means doing something crafty, doing something veteran-like, where he hits him with a 1-2. Dalby shoots in for a desperate takedown because he's hurt, and Tim Means slips a dart on his neck and finishes his night.
Defense, down very much in his career. He's a very solid fighter, in my opinion, and I think that he's gonna ink it out. You're gonna see this as a trend for this fight card. These fights are super close. In my opinion, all of them should be pick 'em. There's not sizable differences in anybody's style necessarily on this fight card. You have to do a lot of research and a lot of background on these guys, and you can't just look at the lines and say, oh, one guy's better than the other, because that's not necessarily how this fight card lines up. What are the odds? What are the odds, Zach?
Looking at the odds right now, we have Tim Means at -130 and Nicolas Dalby at +120. But one of the things I really want to note is when the odds opened 10 days ago on June 16th, Tim Means was a -200 favorite. He was a much more sizable favorite, meaning that all the money is coming in on Nicolas Dalby. Everybody thinks either A, they can get some value out of this bet the same way we said you could on Jai Herbert, or Vegas thinks they know more than us. I tried to track the trend last week, and I picked Ige, not solely, but partially based on the fact that all the money was going in on him. I said, oh, Vegas has to know something. But after that, I realized Vegas don't know shit, and Gage and Zach are about to run them motherfuckers for every penny they got.
And we're jacked up on Mountain Dew.
Red, white, and dew. Mountain Dew. We're jacked up on.
All right, let's move on to our next fight of the night.
Let's do it.
We have Fili versus H-Town Daniel Pineda. Obviously, last week we kind of fucked up. We didn't pick our homegirl, Lauren Murphy.
Yeah, that was on the Izzy card. I feel bad about that still. Wearing my Texas Forever shirt, I feel bad about not picking my hometown girl.
Lauren, we're still with you. However, let's go on to these fights. 5'10", 145, the featherweight division, which this fight's going to be held at. And 31 years old, coming in at 21-8. So he has a few fights underneath his belt. He's coming off a loss. The Thug Nasty Price Mitchell. One of our favorite fighters. Can't wait. We love Thug Nasty here. We love his twister submissions.
And the real true can freaking trunks are badass.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see him fight. I can almost guarantee we'll pick him next time he fights. But our boy Andre Fili lost to him last time, which obviously is aged very well, considering that Bryce Mitchell is a top contender at 145. Look out for him. That fight, there wasn't necessarily a big difference on stand-up, but the big difference came in Andre Fili's ground game. You obviously see that, and although he has some background, you just looking at against the American wrestler. Moving on to his opponent, we have Daniel Pineda. Like I said, our boy from H-Town. He's coming in at 35 years old, 5'7", so he has a little bit of disadvantage in the height department. He's obviously has a lot of experience, 27 and 14. He's coming off a loss to Cub Swanson, but he also has a win of Herbert Burns and a few other guys in the UFC. Actually, I don't know what I'm talking about. That's the only win in the UFC. So he has one win in the UFC. He did get slugged by Cub Swanson, which is, not a knock on him by any means. Cub Swanson's a wily veteran, very good, has a great right hand. However, from what I've seen from Pineda, I think his ground game is a little bit better, and he has a little bit of a wrestling game, as opposed to Andre Fili, where he doesn't necessarily show so much wrestling defense, which could be problematic in this fight.
Yeah, no, I could absolutely see the fact that Fili's wrestling defense has not looked great, but both of these guys are the definition of inconsistency. We see them come out and have a really good performance, and then they come out the next time they fight and look really bad. So it's hard to get a read on what we actually, feel for these guys here, because I suppose we're assuming that we're going to see the best version of Pineda and the best version of Fili tomorrow, and we're going to get a banger of a fight, which is, ideal. But, kind of like Gage said, Pineda will wrestle. He has a willingness to wrestle. And Fili, doesn't have much for a ground game. But I like Fili here. I think there's something about the boxing. When he gets it going, when he gets into that rhythm, he does have moments where he looks really good. I'm not really seeing a whole bunch of KOs on his record. I'm seeing a lot more decisions, which is fine. Grind out a win, figure out a way to get it however you can. I see submissions and TKOs from Pineda, but I don't know, man. Fili's 31. He trains at Team Alpha Male with Faber and Cody Garbrandt and the boys, which, if you're a bigger guy, I probably take that as a knock on you. But when you're a smaller guy training with really, really good training partners, I think that's a solid advantage to have. He's got a lot more UFC experience than Pineda does. So, I'll pray to the betting gods tonight and hope that picking against my H-Town native won't screw me in the ass again. I'm H-Town till I drown, but I am going with Andre Fili here. So let's look at the odds. We see Andre Fili's coming in as a pretty sizable favorite at minus 215, and Pineda's at plus 200 right now. So there's a pretty big discrepancy there in Vegas. But what are your thoughts there? How does that line up to you?
Like I said again, in my mind, this is almost a toss-up for plus 200 and minus 215. I just don't really see a value there to pick the favorite in any of these. I think minus 215 is way too high for almost a toss-up of a fight, in my opinion. I think that nobody can definitively say, "Oh, Andre Fili is better than Daniel Pineda" by any means. I just think there's too much value at plus 200 for Daniel Pineda. Not being a homer or anything, just throw some money. You could throw a parlay together pretty easily of just the underdogs, and bet $5 and make a lot of money here. But
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
I think minus 215 is way too high for this. But, you know, as being a better, I'm almost saying hammer down some of these underdogs and then take some favorites on the top of the card, which we'll get to. But you can have a pretty nice parlay at the end of the day.
Absolutely agree. You know, we're seeing both of these guys coming off of losses, like Gage already mentioned. So in my own head, I'm imagining we're going to see about as best of the version of both of these guys as we can imagine. Not because, oh, they might be cut. I mean, they might, but there's always something on the line when you step in the cage for the UFC. But something in my head, and it's not definitive, it's not hammer down, it's not bet the house, but
Not big balls of Cowtown, like your mom.
But in my own head, I think the best version of Andre Fili can beat the best version of Daniel Pineda. And I guess we're just going to have to wait to find out on Saturday. Gage and I might have our own mixed martial arts bout after we realize who wins these picks.
Timur, Valiev, very good fight here. Valiev is, Barcelos is coming in at 16-1. This is very, this has a lot of implications on the
135. Bantamweight.
Yes, we had the 135 division here, bantamweight. A lot on the line. From the stats, you can see that Barcelos has come in with quite a good win streak. His last loss coming in 2014, so he hasn't lost in almost 7 years. As you can see, Barcelos is very good on the stand-up game, also very good jiu-jitsu guy. However, he's not very adept wrestler, like American wrestler, where he's not going to be able to take guys down necessarily. But when the fight does go to the ground, he's also very good in just submissions. He has, I believe, 7 submissions in his career.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So moving on to his opponent, Timur Valiev, he's coming at 17-2, coming off a win against Martin Day. Obviously, a pretty good win, I have to say. It was a unanimous decision. He likes to keep it on the feet. However, he came out for a loss not too recently where he decided to stand up in the entire fight and not use his wrestling or his takedown defense, or his takedown rather. So I think that the Dagestani kind of takes this to the ground again, which he did in his last fight, and control the ground or control the fight via GMP, ground and pound. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm not really sure where it stands, you know, as it relates to his UFC fights. But I see that he's usually weighed in at 145, and this is going to be a bantamweight fight. So, you know, last night.
Oh, so he's dropping down a weight.
He is dropping down a weight. Which, you know, I was literally just about to say may or may not help his chances as a wrestler, because he's probably going to have a size advantage in the cage on fight day. So being heavier and being a wrestler makes it a little bit easier to get guys down. There's just something about this Raoni Barcelos dude, man. I think he's going to be a real problem in the bantamweight division. The way he strikes, he kicks incredibly hard. And that's what I mean is if Timur Valiev decides to shoot any sort of lazy takedown or any sort of takedown that's just not 100% by the book technical, Barcelos could easily slap a submission on him and end the night that way as well. So I know looking at the odds before I pull them up, Barcelos is going to be a minus 210 favorite and Valiev is plus 190. So while I'm going to sit here and pick Barcelos, I'm almost more confident to say that there's a little bit more value in the plus 190 for Valiev. But I'm going Barcelos here. I just think the dude is going to come on hot in this bantamweight division that's already stacked and loaded with talent. And I think he's going to get a big fight after this if he can win and win in convincing fashion.
like him, phenomenal. I don't really see the knockout power per se. Like he doesn't have Cody Garbrandt power, Rob Font jab power. I just think Valiev takes this to the ground, kind of controls him, especially he's coming down weight, so he's gonna have a. If he makes weight, that's yet to be seen at this point. We're on Friday, but I don't think he's weighed in yet. I just think that Valiev kind of controls us from the ground, being that he's the bigger man. What's the go back to their stats on their size? So we have Barcelos. He's 34 years old, 5'7" and 135, and Timur Valiev. Yeah, he is 5'6", so there's not a big height difference. So I think Valiev is a lot bigger. He's a bigger body. So I just think that this is going to the ground. And I don't think Barcelos, unless he gets a submission, can really defend it ground and pound.
I was about to say, looking at some props and kind of playing around with what the money looks like here, it seems like at minus 180, everybody is convinced this fight is going to go to decision. Plus 155 for the fight doesn't go to decision. Not great odds, especially when we've been sitting here talking about the fact that if Timur Valiev gets on top and is offensively productive with his wrestling, we've seen him ground and pound, we've seen him inflict damage from the top, but I think, we could see Barcelos, if that starts to become a problem, pull guard and start looking for a submission. So if you're looking for some value outside of the plus 190 money line bet on Timur Valiev, I'd say there's a little bit of value in plus 650 for Barcelos to win by submission. So I'm going to go with Barcelos, but I don't really have a prediction as to how this fight's going to end because, this is a huge opportunity for both of these guys who only have a couple of UFC fights under their belt, and they're fighting, 2 fights down from the main event on a UFC fight night card.
There's a lot online for each of these guys to move up high in the division after this fight. So, this is going to be a very competitive fight. I think they know that each fighter has a lot on the line to move up, get a name brand fighter, and maybe get a UFC fight night main event under their belt after this, depending on what they do here.
To our co-main event of the evening.
And I got a mullet rocking right now.
He's got nice and lined up too. Gage came in looking sharp for you over there.
I got a mullet. He got a mullet. You know what I have to do. He's fighting OSP, Ovince Preux, the veteran, one of the longest tenured veterans in the upper weight divisions, like heavyweight divisions. He's fighting at heavyweight this time, second time, this being Ovince Preux. First fight came in 2020, May of 2020, to be particular, against Ben Rothwell when he came in and fought heavyweight. Usually every other fight in his UFC career has been at lightweight, 205, coming off his most recent loss against Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill. That was in December of 2020. As you know, I picked against him last time around when he fought Paul Craig. Got his arm basically snapped off, not pretty sight.
Yeah, you hit on that one and I missed on that one.
Yeah. Sure. So he lost to Jamal Hill via TKO. Going back and looking at the tape, we have going back to OSP, Ovince Preux. He's coming at 6'3", and for a heavyweight fight, his only previous fight came in at about 240. Going to Tanner Boser, he's coming at 19-8. All right, not great, not stellar record at heavyweight, but he's only 29, coming at 6'2", 242. So there's not that big of a height or weight difference here. Contrary to popular belief that OSP is coming up weight class, he has no problem being that big. He cuts a lot of weight to get to light heavyweight at 205, almost 40 pounds. So getting into a breakdown of this fight, I feel like Tanner Boser, although he's coming off 2 losses, He got laid on his most recent loss. He really just got laid on by a guy that was weighing at the limit, but it's probably closer to about almost 300 pounds. But Tanner looked more agile in the stand-up game. You could have definitely took that, obviously being a split decision loss. You could think of that as like Tanner Boser won the fight. I mean, it only took one judge to score one round differently for that to be a win in Tanner Boser's decision. But when you look at his past fights, he's knocking people out and he's losing via split decision. He's not really getting knocked out. He moves too quick for the heavyweights. So I think this is a perfect matchup for Tanner Boser versus OSP. I think they're very similar. Tanner Boser can make it down to light heavyweight. He'd be a force to be reckoned with there. But this fight is going to be stand up in my opinion. I don't think it's going to be very much lane prey, ground and pound kind of situation here. But I think that Tanner Boser at 240 pounds versus OSP at 240 pounds, Tanner Boser is going to move a lot quicker, be in and out. He's one of the best mobile athletes in the heavyweight division, in my opinion. I think he gets it done. I don't know necessarily as a knockout fact, but I think he gets it done via decision, just as in and out, kind of moving like our lighter weight classes at 240.
I absolutely see a pretty similar thing here, especially when you consider that OSP only took this fight like a week and a half ago. So we're talking about going from regularly being at 205 and probably walks around at 230 to saying,
no, probably 240, bro.
I just mean when you're that big, you cut a little bit or you add some muscle or you do something. I just feel like OSP is walking in at his walking weight, like at what his natural weight is. I mean, that may be an advantage for him, but like you said, Tanner Boser moves very well for a heavyweight. His footwork is very good. His striking looks usually quite crisp. He's a very powerful puncher. The big hole in his game, like you said, especially against Ilir Latifi, was he could not stop a takedown. And then when he did get taken to the ground, he had a really hard time getting up. I don't see OSP probably being the smaller man here, getting him to the ground. Definitely being the older man by almost 10 years. I don't see him having the strength or the testosterone advantage here.
Low-key city.
We'll come back to that one, man. Jamal Hill, we just saw, like Gage said, he got dominated on the ground by Paul Craig, which is not a disrespectful thing to say at all, because Paul Craig's a really good grappler. But OSP was not dominating Jamal Hill on the ground, who, if we're using him for a baseline, we'll say Jamal Hill is a bad grappler. So if OSP was not dominating Jamal Hill at 205, he's not going to get Tanner Boser on the ground at heavyweight. So for me personally, I see him get knocked out, man. Poor OSP. I don't think it's going to be the first round. And if it is, I think it'll come at the end of the first round. But the guy's just getting a little bit up there. He's getting a little bit more chinny. He's fought a lot of high-quality competition. He went 3 rounds with Dom Reyes, beat Corey Anderson, lost to Uzdemir, lost to John Jones, Glover Teixeira. We've seen this guy fight everybody. He beat Shogun Rua, but I just think the OSP days are over, and I really feel bad for the guy a little bit in terms of the fact that he took this fight, and Tanner Boser very well could hurt him pretty badly.
Easily one of the best heavyweight strikers in mixed martial arts history in the past 20 to 30 years. He didn't get even. I'm pretty sure he's coming off. Andre Arlovski's coming off a TKO win recently, but needless to say, I think Tanner Boser can hang in there, especially with a guy like OSP who's at heavyweight. Not as big a hitter as Francis Ngannou, Jair Rosenstrike, those kind of characters. So it'll be interesting to see. Good fight, but I think we both pretty much have a consensus on Tanner Boser trained. The mullet man.
Looking at the odds, this is actually a pretty favorable odds for us both picking a favorite here with Tanner Boser at -162 and OSP at +150. And then, like I said, I'm very confident in a knockout here. I'm very confident Tanner Boser is going to sleep him. So I see a lot of value in +260 being the odds for Tanner Boser by TKO or knockout. So
I mean, I like
I was about to say we're gonna have to get crafty. If y'all follow us on social media, you might be able to see a bet card or something along those lines. But there's definitely gonna have to be some parlaying and some teasing and some moving of lines, and we're definitely gonna have to get creative with this week. But I'll be damned if we don't make some money.
Especially with the lines where they are the day before the fight. I mean, there's money to be made in this card, and there's not a big balls in Cowtown pick. Let's just say that.
I was about to say a lot of these guys are guys that are new to the UFC or guys that haven't gotten their big chance yet. We're seeing them put on the big main card. So we're seeing big opportunities for guys like Herbert, Renato Moicano, Raoni Barcelos, Timur, Valiev, Tanner Boser in a co-main event. I never thought I'd say OSP versus Tanner Boser was going to be a co-main event on a UFC Fight Night card. But again, huge opportunity for these guys. I think they're going to come out and compete really hard, and I think we're going to have a good day of fights on Saturday for sure. But that
moving on to the main event, it's time! Coming in against Alexander Drago Volkov. I mean, this guy is damn near a skyscraper, coming in at 6'7", about 264 pounds, 1 pound under the limit. He's coming in at 33 and 8, 32 years old, and has a wealth of experience at 33 wins and 8 losses. His counterpart, Ciryl Gane, coming in at 31, so only a couple years younger, 6'5", 2 inches shorter, and 247, about 20 pounds lighter. Although Volkov is 2 inches taller, they have about a similar reach advantage. Of course, Ciryl Gane is 8-0, undefeated in heavyweight. I'm pretty sure he's the only heavyweight undefeated with more than 5 wins in the UFC roster. He has wins over the aforementioned Tanner Boser, where he pieced him up. JDS Junior Dos Santos got a win via TKO elbow, and most recently over a 5-round decision over Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who was also previously unbeaten until he faced Gane. I think Gane, for being as big as he is, man, he's built like a Greek statue, absolutely shredded to the gills for being 250 pounds. One specimen of the athlete. Getting into specifics, his Muay Thai, his kickboxing is pretty much unparalleled in the heavyweight division for that size. He moves very well. He's a better version of Tanner Boser, in my opinion. Definitely more stacked, muscle-wise. We haven't really seen necessarily the knockout power in his hands like Jairzinho does or Francis does. Once again, repeating myself, but I think that his technical skills and the way he fended off a big power puncher in Junior Dos Santos and Jairzinho Rozenstruik in his last 2 fights, I was able to touch and go, and not get hit. His chin is held up incredibly well. Not necessarily getting hit clean by either guy, but being able to take some of their shots and continue throughout the fight. So I'm thinking Ciryl Gane. I think the UFC is definitely going to push him. I think he's almost third guy in the title contention besides Derek Lewis and John Jones in the heavyweight division. Well, let's move over to Alexander Volkov. This guy is no slouch either. I mean, I'm picking Ciryl Gane here, but Volkov, wealth of experience, man, for only being 32, 33, I believe. Yeah, 32. Coming off a win versus Alistair Overeem, which TKO against our boy Walt Harris. Lost the decision to Curtis Blades 3 fights ago, and also lost against Derek Lewis versus via punches. Volkov likes to use his range, his distance, kind of use his jab, get in there, kickbox a little bit, use his power, and just kind of make it his fight. I think that plays too much into Gane's perspective and how he likes to fight. I think Curtis Blades, obviously one of the great takedown artists in the heavyweight division. He couldn't stop his takedowns. I don't think Gane's going to take him down. Even though Gane does have takedowns and submissions in his arsenal, he's not necessarily a Curtis Blades in that sense. Also, he doesn't have the knockout power that Derek Lewis does. So this is going to be a very interesting fight, very evenly matched. Zach, what are your thoughts?
I think you really kind of segued me right into where I wanted to go with this, because this week I have flipped back and forth multiple times on this fight. Not necessarily how I saw it played out, but who I was going to pick. I started off being very staunch in Volkov. Then I rewatched some of the Ciryl Gane fights and said, this guy's pretty fucking good. But at the end of the day, we're going to split. I'm going Volkov here. I'm taking the vet, and here's why. Solely, you touched on it. We look at Volkov's wins in the UFC. Let me restart. Let me rephrase. Volkov's only a year older. He's 32. Gane is 31, excuse me. Volkov has 41 professional fights, and Ciryl Gane only has 8. So there's a huge experience gap. And we've seen Volkov fight the best of the best. He fought Alistair Overeem. He fought Derek Lewis. And I'm not going to mention some of the rest of these names because I'm bringing them up later. That's where I'm going, man. I think if you're going to pick Ciryl Gane, it's not an uneducated pick. I'm not going to shit on you for picking Ciryl Gane. I just want to make sure you do it for the right reasons. If you think Ciryl Gane is going to come out and wrestle and be able to get Volkov on the mat and keep him there, you're sorely mistaken. Curtis Blades is the best offensive wrestler in the heavyweight division, without a doubt. Curtis Blades can take dudes down. Curtis Blades had to shoot 24 times against Volkov, and he only landed 8 or 9 of those takedowns. He only landed about a third of them. And then, like Gage said, you look down at Volkov's 2017 and 2018 years, he not out-grappled, but he was not dominated on the ground and was not submitted by Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve, who's the submission record holder at heavyweight, if I'm not mistaken, and Fabricio Verdun. So I can't imagine this is going to be a ground fight. I can't imagine we're going to see Ciryl Gane win by submission here. That just doesn't make sense to me. So I see a stand-up fight. And then looking back at the last time we saw Gane in the octagon against Jairzinho Rozenstruik in February of this year, I like Jairzinho. I picked him against Sakai. I think he's a really good fighter. He's a very talented kickboxer, but more or less, he's bigger heavyweight, and he's one of the stereotypical heavyweights that's kind of heavy-footed. He kind of trods around. He's kind of flat-footed. He doesn't move necessarily as much. And I've said this on previous podcasts. I'm standing to it. Ciryl Gane dances around the ring like a fucking French ballerina. But
most of all, I think the reason why Ciryl Gane, in my opinion, the French ballerina moves around the octagon.
His footwork is incredible.
Incredible. And I just don't think that Volkov, with his wealth of experience, ever necessarily fought a guy that moves as well for as big as he is and has the power that he does. Obviously, he doesn't have Francis power, like I said, but I mean, the dude hits hard. He'll touch you up, and he doesn't mind not getting a knockout. He'll 1-2 all day, hit you, and it's going to wear on you. best way I can describe it is this guy, he moves like a John Jones, especially for as big as he is. He's a pure athlete. And I don't know if Alexander Volkov can handle that athleticism. And obviously it's a fight. Those guys are going to get touched up no matter what. I just feel like that Ciryl Gane is going to frustrate Volkov, and Volkov's not going to be able to get enough strikes on him to do the kind of damage that he wants.
To kind of expand on that point, I think the adjective and the way you kind of have to describe Ciryl Gane comes from basketball, I guess. He's a unicorn. He's a big dude with incredibly good feet. It's kind of like the stretch fours in the NBA that can shoot the basketball and run the floor and do all the things that the smaller guys can do. Ciryl Gane is that guy to the UFC. Like Dave said, he has incredible footwork. He moves around the cage. And, I do have plenty of scenarios in my head where I see him winning, especially because Volkov, while they're pretty similar in reach, actually I believe Gane will have a slight reach advantage. But Volkov has a pretty definitive height advantage. And the only thing that means to me is he's got really long legs, which gives Ciryl Gane big targets to land inside leg kicks. Mm-hmm. So if Gane can move around the cage and, like you said, touch him up, kick him in the legs, slow him down, I think he could dance his way to another unanimous decision victory, 30-27, or 50-45, 5-5, excuse me. But I don't see that happening personally. I see Volkov taking the center of the cage. He's going to use those long legs with maybe the front body kick that we saw him stop Walt Harris with. I think he's going to use that to control range. And then I think the longer this fight goes on, just the wealth of experience that Volkov has is going to come into play to his advantage, because the more we see Gane circle, the more we see Gane move. Volkov's a long guy. Volkov has long legs, long arms. He's going to be able to figure out a way to cut him off and corner him in that cage. And I'm not, solidified. I'm not going to say that Drago is going to knock him out by any means, but I think if he can get Gane pinched back against the cage, we can see him have a lot more success. And I think Volkov is a lot more mobile, a lot more willing to do that, and a lot, better at doing it than Jairzinho would have been. I think styles make fights. We talk about it all the time. And I think Jairzinho was a fight they gave Gane because they're giving him the push right now. They want him to be that contender. They're looking for new blood at heavyweight. I think they gave Gane Jairzinho because he could beat him. It's a win that aged really well after Jairzinho's performance against CKE. But I just think there's something about Volkov that's gonna prevail. And at the end of the day, just because Ciryl Gane loses this fight doesn't mean they're going to stop giving him the push. Doesn't mean he's not going to have a heavyweight title shot in the next year and a half. Because I think he's going to develop and continue to get better. And he's going to be a real problem and a guy I have a real hard time picking against in the future. But specifically as it relates to this fight and this fight only, I think Volkov is going to hand him that one loss to where he's like, okay, I'm not the shit. I'm not the man. I need to go get better. I need to constantly be improving. And then, exactly. It'll humble him, and it'll probably take him further in his career than I think a win would, necessarily.
Before we get into I just want to say one thing. I think that has a great body type, not necessarily as girthy and just weight much, but as the movement and the athleticism of John Jones without the skill of John Jones or the power of Francis. He's like a mixture between John and Francis. So he's very much in the running. He has a very good mix of skills. Even spars with Francis and trains with Francis. So obviously, I don't think he's ever tasted Francis' power, but that doesn't matter for this fight. I'm taking Ciryl Gane. He's taking Alexander Volkov, and here are the odds.
Ciryl Gane is the favorite here, with probably respectively so, at -136, and Volkov is at +144 at this point. I am looking at the odds and the trends right now, and it looks as though Gane is taking all the money right now. It looks like this fight opened a little bit closer to even money, and it's just started going in on Gane because a lot of people are very high on him. And let me rephrase. I'm not high on him. I think he's a really good fighter. I think he's going to have a long career in the UFC, and I think he's going to be somebody we have to talk about for a really long time. But for the sake of picking against him, dude looks like Tarzan, fights like Jane. So I think I'm going to take Volkov at plus 144. Gage is usually our dirty dog. He loves to stick with the underdogs, but this main event here, I'm taking the dog. Anything else to say about the main event, man?
I don't think so. I think it's time for 5-minute championship round. Let's get it popping, son.
Let's minutes, and we are about to roll. Ready to fight? Let's fight. So looking at just kind of random stuff we have to talk about. Max Holloway pulls out Herbert, and just recently, Kevin Lee pulls out Herbert from his bout with Sean Brady. What do you think about that? Kevin Lee.
Well, I'd like to get Max Holloway first. I think Max Holloway, I think any market, mixed martial arts, would love to see Max Holloway in the ring, or in the octagon in this case, get in as much and as often as possible. I think it's a disservice. I think that was going to be a great fight. You basically had the #1 contender, fighting the #3 contender. However you want to rank Brian Ortega in the situation, but it was basically the top 2 guys that aren't fighting for a championship were going to fight in that fight. I think that sucks. However, we got to get, bonus main event. We'll talk about our next question. But next question you asked was Kevin Lee. We haven't seen Kevin Lee in the octagon for a while, and it kind of sucks that he just pulled out against Sean Brady. I thought it was going to be a highly contested matchup.
The rib injury, too.
Yeah, highly contested matchup. I think Sean Brady has a very good record, and it's going to be kind of his benchmark for how good he was against a very good veteran in Kevin Lee. I like Kevin Lee. I think he's great. I think he's also a very good promoter, very skillful, and I'm kind of sad that we don't get to see him in the octagon here next week or in 2 weeks, whenever he was scheduled to fight.
I was about to say, it's kind of a downer to talk about injuries and talk about these fights we were anticipating getting pulled. But as far as I know and as far as I've seen, it seems like they're looking to shift both of those fights by about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, and try to reschedule Sean Lee versus Brady in August, and then Max Holloway versus Jair in August or September.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we are going to end up getting both of those fights. We're just going to have to hold our breath a little bit longer.
My question to you is, what do you think about people flying into the main event in place of Max Holloway?
I can't tell you the guy's name off the top of my head, and I don't really have time to go look it up, but I would be shocked if Islam Makhachev opened that line at any less than -350, -400, maybe even higher, man.
That's big balls and Cowtown in on the fucking mom type shit. We're fucking picking Islam Makhachev. He's going for a title. I don't think anybody can tell us otherwise. The guy's a fucking Khabib reincarnated. Forget about Khabib. Islam Makhachev is the next fucking name in the lightweight division.
Just particularly because they gave him a guy that seems to be way under his talent caliber, way under his level. But he said, "I'm not going to be a bitch. I want to fight. I want to get in the ring. So if you need me to beat the shit out of this guy to prove to you that I deserve a top 10, top 5 opponent," but I think we're both pretty set on Islam Makhachev. I'd bet the house on that.
I bet the house on it. There's nobody this guy fucking loses. I don't even think he gets caught. I think as soon as that fucking stony. But
Okay.
What do you got in the Sandboy versus Dillashaw fight? Obviously, we're gonna get into the details when this fight comes around, but are you not entertained?
That is a clear-cut #1 contender fight if I've ever seen one. Whoever wins that fight is going to fight the winner of the Aljo and Jan rematch. I think, Colby Covington came out and called Marty Fake Newsman the CEO of EPO, but we're talking about the OG King, TJ Dillashaw, the original CEO of EPO. So I think I've already expressed my opinions on here. I'm pro Team Alpha Male. I'm with Faber and Garbrandt. Fuck TJ Dillashaw. So I'm going to take Sandhagen ahead of time. I think Sandhagen's looked incredibly good. And not as a knock on TJ, because as much as I dislike him, the dude can fucking scrap. But I'm going Sandhagen. What's your thoughts?
I'll give you this more. I'll be damned if nobody else wanted to see a fucking Cejudo versus Dillashaw rematch.
I'm with you on that. And that's time. That is our 5-minute round. We are going to break. And I guess we're going to have to go to the judges and see who won that one by decision. But I'm Zach Gleason. This G Money. And this is another episode of the Caffeine Experience. I don't know.